Yes, welcome to Star Trek Trek, our ongoing journey through everything that is Star Trek. And we have just watched our first Star Trek Lower Decks review, and it is, of course, the finale of Season 1. What a better place to start our Lower Decks journey than the end of a storyline. But with Season 1, Episode 10, No Small Parts, as selected by our wonderful co-host, Dan. Dan, why did you pick this episode as part of your draft? What inspired you to say, hey, you know what? We've not watched Lower Decks before. Let's get right into it. Let's go with a feature film of an episode.
Yeah, so during our draft, I wanted to make sure I represented all the different walks of Trek life. So Lower Decks was among them, and this one stood out. We got great cameos here from a number of Trek actors and non-Trek actors. I pointed out during the episode, I love Badgie. Jack McBrayer is fantastic. I loved him in 30 Rock. Also, another lesser-known comedian, Rich Fulcher, plays the Pakled captain.
I love Rich Fulcher.
If you know Rich Fulcher,
yes.
Yeah, if you know Rich Fulcher as a comedian, he's an inspired choice for a Pakled captain.
Yep. Snuffbox is ever in my head.
This episode also, Lower Decks is kind of, I don't know, just schizophrenic, and it really jumps, and there's a lot of irons in the fire, and they jam it all into 22 minutes. And this one actually takes a different approach. It's really more of a narrative episode. They actually tell one story. They follow it through the beginning to end. They tie up a lot of the ongoing through lines of the season. They actually did a pretty good job with this for it being just a kind of a Family Guy show for laughs with Star Trek characters thrown into it. So I think it elevates it a little bit above the remainder of Lower Decks. I wouldn't say this is a fantastic episode of Star Trek, but it's a good episode of Lower Decks.
Fantastic. This episode was directed by Barry J. Kelly, who also did some other Lower Decks episodes, mostly Second Contact, Moist Vessel, and two Vics, not two Vics, but two Vics of Lower. Yeah, not that episode. It was written by Mike Mahan, who obviously we know as the creator and showrunner of Star Trek Lower Decks. So
I have a question. Does anybody know, not assume, but know how a director interacts with animated shows like this?
I would assume it would be through storyboarding and animatics.
Yeah. I think there's with anime, because there are different directors for there's lots of animation stuff going on. I think there is definitely a less of a focus on camera work and screening and filming, and more sort of like you say, starts with animatics of framing and pacing, especially imagine a director in animated stuff is more sort of linked to the editing world of things.
So why do you bring it up? Do you have some insight?
Because what I've really appreciated about our reviews is it's helped me look at the different parts that go into episodes, primarily the directing. Like we talked a little bit about this last episode, Sarek, some of the camera work. If you listen to directors talk about the episodes, they do the live action stuff. They always talk about, well, this is what I wanted to capture, or I did it this specifically this way to evoke this. And I imagine it's got to be much more difficult with animation, because I don't know, can you just ask them to redraw things the way you're imagining it in your head? It's a
terrible strain on the animator's wrists. Yes.
Well, so my only real experience with this from a creative point of view is that I have had art commissioned in the past, and that's a fairly straightforward process where you got someone, you say, I've got this idea for a scene with these characters, and then they'll go, okay, cool, here's a rough sketch, and you go, can you change the posing on that? Can you do this? I really like this aspect. Can you dial that more? And then they do revised sketches, and it's okay, cool. I imagine that there's key scenes that you would want to do that for, really break it down in terms of specific character tics and character moments. In terms of Shaq's getting blown up. You want to the director would have been sure. I want to make sure that he is smiling and laughing and having a great time as he's being blown up. I want this specific detail, these specific character bits. But if it's a case of we're doing an action scene, well, we've already put in the character bit of we're going to be using these classic TOS and TNG props. So just interact with them however you like, and you probably are a bit more hands off there. But that's kind of the thing with animation, is that while you don't have to worry as much about where you're placing the camera, you kind of have to worry about it even more, because you are the camera. You have total creative control of exactly what you're looking at any one time. There is no aspect of it that is an accident. You don't have any incidents of a little Starbucks cup sat on someone's table. There's no one ever going to get caught in the mirror in a boom shot, you know? So you have that kind of microcosm control. And I feel like that really works to Lower Decks' advantage, precisely because it is so laugh a minute and so heavily reliant on, well, not reliant, but it uses nostalgia and name drops and references to enhance the humor. Like, stuff like the Spock helmet and the batleths and like all the little like tweaks and the EPs, for example, that they aren't remarked upon at all. Like, it's entirely possible that an animator was just like a massive Star Trek TOS fan was like, I want to have Sulu's like fencing sword here.
I think that's
the biggest do that.
The biggest compliment of Lower Decks that I can give is that it doesn't use, like in other ways, it doesn't use like the Star Trek history as a main focal point of the plot, but uses it to enhance like the jokes for people in the know. Like, anyone can sit and watch this episode of Lower Decks and go like, yeah, I enjoyed that start to finish, and not have any of the clue of the little like in jokes that Mariner makes or like anyone else does, or sort of like, oh, TOS, those old scientists, you know, they'll be like, oh right, that's just what he calls them. But if you know, yeah, it's a little bit more funnier, and they kind of use it to flesh out the world for those who are already fans, but for those that are just coming into it, they're not lost either. And I feel like that's kind of like something that Lower Decks has always done very well. But on the sort of going back to the idea of like the animators, like Overtide says, there are Keen Frey animators, there are in between animators. But the one scene that kind of sticks out to me as like being like a very directorial choice is like in the intro to this episode where you have the other Cerritos class ship. And it goes to warp with the grappler attached to it, and you get that kind of almost Star Trek 09 shot of it being ripped away, and you know it's silhouetted against the sun, and it's actually quite a dramatic shot for a Lower Decks episode, and it's very purposefully done. That feels like that's a directional choice as opposed to just a kind of like by the numbers Simpsons, Family Guy-esque kind of animation.
Yeah, like I imagine that would have had key art that would have been sketched out. The director would have gone, I want this, this, and that. Can I go with this color palette?
It's a different kind of direction, isn't it?
It goes slow-mo, and it actually reminds me of like the early 2000s Disney animation, turn of the millennium kind of. I actually got Mulan vibes in that shot that you're talking about for whatever reason. So it's very heavily stylized.
So yeah, this to me this kind of almost felt like a feature film. Like I feel like if this had like, let's say that this has been one and done for Lower Decks, no one watched it, no one commissioned it, they went, right, this is Mike Mahan's fever dream, and then kind of gone, right, okay, here you go, here's a 2-hour finale, you can see this off and you get your big moment. Like, this episode could have benefited with having a longer runtime. Like, as much as we say that Lower Decks is frenetic, I feel like I would have liked to have seen more scenes out of this, like expanded on and maybe made it like an hour's worth rather than like half an hour. And like there were moments like it did feel like it went from one, and that is Lower Decks to a T. It does go bam, 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 bam. But compared to most Lower Decks episodes, this was definitely the most cinematic of all of them, really.
Well, no, the most cinematic would be Crisis Point.
Okay, that isn't a cinematic joke at the Final Frontier's expense. Okay.
Yes. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I almost don't regard like if you regard like Lower Deck seasons as a movie in and of themselves, because like if you stack the episodes up against one another and like just watch them sequentially, you kind of get like an extended movie. It's around about what like 25 minutes each. You add up. Maybe like three and a bit hours.
I think they didn't really do that to like season 4 and 5. I think season 5 definitely, like, I'll agree with you there. They had like a through line, but I feel like this 1 and 2 weren't.
There's a lot of stuff here that like it's like you get all the stuff like Shax's relationship with Rutherford with Baby Bear. You get the whole Badgie callback. You get the entire thing with Mariner and her mother, which is again, as you remarked, it's a secret at the beginning of the show, which would be this would be a great final act, like thing to come into the final act.
Boimler's been gunning for a promotion since the first episode. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Precisely, like Tendy's character is well established as like the eternal optimist by this point. Like all the pieces are in place, and I would be very curious to just like kind of watch. Like, it'd be very easy to cut all of the Lower Decks episodes into a movie just by cutting off the credits and like kind of stapling them together a little bit, and I'd be curious to see what that would hold up as a movie. I feel like it would actually be pretty decent. It's just a case of the way it's presented as a 20-25 minute episode makes you view it very differently, and there is kind of an attitude of, oh, it's not as serious. Well, there's some really good character work going on here. Like the emotional beat's still here. I still care about these characters, and when it decides to take itself very seriously and be about Star Trek, I think it arguably succeeds more than a lot of like Discovery's kind of more half-baked attempts at it with the whole "we are Starfleet" type thing. I think Lower Decks comes at it from a more earnest and more earned perspective, where it's like going from the scrappy underdogs. And I feel like it absolutely lands every time. Like I've never gone into a Lower Decks a moment where you can feel that they're going for something emotional and gone, oh, that didn't really come across properly. It's like I always feel like they always manage to land it.
I feel like we're very polarized as well, because we've kind of gotten a tale of two halves here, because we've had the very dialogue, slow, drawn out, heavy Sarek episode, which we've just watched,
Jeez.
into this sort of like very
By the way,
frenetic action.
did you intend that to be such a polar opposite?
No, but I did want a nice palate cleanser, so we get that.
Definitely. Just for a fun fact, if anyone wants to know, this is the this episode has the second most amount of words spoken in a Lower Decks episode. The first being the finale of season 5. So this did jam a lot in those 20. There was 4,190 words for those wanting the.
Oh my gosh!
So that we were
Wow.
and. On the terms of Star Trek, that's not a lot. Like, that's like down in the ratings, but it's in 24 minutes. Like, there are TNG episodes with less words in it than this. Quite a lot of them. So, if everyone's thinking this is quite frenetic, that's why. Otto and Dan, any more to say on this? And now you talk.
So yeah, there were some sweet moments. I think that it was pretty obvious even from the first episode that Mariner and Mariner were related. Mariner and Freeman were related, and so it's one of those things that I guess I thought maybe I just missed something because everything comes at you so fast. Like I thought it was implied and everybody understood, and I didn't really understand why it was such a big revelation in the final episode. I guess maybe that's the humor of it, is that it's so obvious to the viewer that everybody is like so surprised, and whatever. That's a joke beat. I think there was a sweet moment. Well, I guess we'll get into best and worst later on, but yeah, I mean, the episode delivered, and I really particularly enjoyed the space battle scenes too. Like, I think he did a great job directing that and making sure that was impactful and visceral, and the Stars, you pointed out, the soundtrack is amazing for it. Like, it's really well done. Everything is executed well. Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, everything is executed very well. I can't really point out a lot of faults to this, other than that it's just so fast compared to what we're used to.
Awkward silence. Fun voice actors. So obviously we've spoken about Jack McBrayer in this episode, and Rich Fulcher as well. Ghost Snuffbox with Matt Berry, amazing series. Really weird, but worth it. Also, we had Nolan North was in this episode, a very featured voice actor. He played Lars Lundy.
Drake, yeah.
He plays Lundy, Lars Lundy in this. Merrin Dungy, who was the interviewer from Star Trek Picard from the very first sort of like episode, she was in there. She was also featured in Babylon 5 of all things as well.
She was in King of Queens.
Yeah, that too.
I was waiting for you to say 24.
Everyone's been in 24. Echo Kellum, who people might know as played Mr. Terrific from Arrow, from the CW series. He was in this as well as
the lesser Mr. Terrific.
The other Mr. Do you know what? He was actually a pretty good Mr. Terrific in Arrow. I'll give him that. He wasn't bad in that. We had Ketha Donahue as Peanut Hamper as well. So I want to touch on Peanut Hamper. Peanut Hamper is probably one of my least favorite characters in all of Star Trek. Not because of this episode. This episode was hilarious for her being in it, just going like, "Oh, you can do this job," and she goes, "Fuck you, I'm gone. Bye." But no, there's another episode that comes in like season 2 or 3, which is just
I think it's season 2.
Yeah, I
don't think it's bad. I think it's a good episode. I just think you don't like. Yeah, I think you don't like it. That's not the same as it being a bad episode.
Well, no, I
think it's set out to do exactly what it went. I think we had this discussion when it came out, and I was of the opinion that.
And I think I remember saying
exactly what it intends to do. You just disagree with that premise.
You are correct, and I expect you guys to sway me the way I swayed you guys about the motion picture about it sometime. But let's have that discussion sometime, far in the future. But yeah, no, Peanut Hamper's debut in this episode. I kind of love the exocomps. We spoke about this in the watch long, but the exocomps replicating nozzles. I think that's a great little sort of gimmick, and I want a penknife that does that.
I also have to say, like, I think that one of Lower Decks' strengths is that it has so many different types of humor that do operate. Because you've got what I would identify as like the Family Guy gag, which is like stuff like Rutherford's like mode switch on his implant. That is explicitly a Family Guy
Optimistic mode. This is
gag.
going to be great.
It's an excuse to do silly voices, excuse to like you liven that up. And then you've got like the reference humor, which is stuff like Landrew, which is hilarious if you know what it's referencing. Even if it's not, even if you
I'm
don't
still
know what
doing
it's
the Red
referencing, it's
Hour.
still pretty funny. It's like, but I just bought a new sky. And so it's one of those things where it's like even if you don't know the reference, you can kind of tell that it is a reference to something, and that like it still works on its own merits. It just works so much better. But then you have the humor that arises from.
Sorry, I had this a lot watching Frasier when I was younger. That's typically an adult show, and they have adult humor, and so they would make a joke, and I wouldn't get it, but it was so expertly delivered, I would laugh anyway. And I feel like sometimes they pull out the same thing here.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's exactly correct. And then you have the writing, like the humor that arises from the writing, which is stuff like Mariner suddenly deciding to button up and pull down her sleeves and change her hair, and you're just like, that's freakish, stop doing that. And the Section 31 power walk, which like that is reference humor, but then it becomes character building humor when it's done by Mariner, and they transform and go through the different types very fluidly, which I think is very much to its strength.
I think those old scientists, the Strangely Worlds episode, has lent a lot of weight behind some of the jokes that Lower Decks joked on other Star Trek for doing it, but then they brought some of that in a serious way, like pointless power walk, but also the character mannerisms. Once we saw them in the flesh in the crossover episode, that actually lent a lot more weight to Lower Decks' credibility. Not that it didn't have any to begin with, because like pretty much from episode 1 we saw like, oh shit, these people love Star Trek, but also for it not just to exist as a gag part of the universe, but actually as a serious part of the universe. And this is another part of sort of what leans to it as well, and people just go like, oh, it's animation, I'm not watching it. I'm like, well, it's fine, up to you. But
there is an interesting idea of like what would happen if you swap Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks' format. What do you think Lower Decks would look like?
Isn't that what they did with season 3 of
realistic
Stranger Worlds? Ew.
Well, that's because I'm literally like thinking about it. Like, what would happen if Strange New Worlds was the animated show and Lower Decks was the more realistic show? Would you then take Lower Decks more seriously, even if it was basically the exact same show, just maybe like 2 episodes stapled together? Would you take it more seriously, or would you take Strange New Worlds' thing more seriously? Is it a case of the tone, or is it the presentation, or is it both? That kind of means you view it differently.
I think I'll say a quick moment. The energy and the pacing of Lower Decks, I think if you stripped out the asides, the Family Guy asides, and you just took the exact script and just stretched it out to a 44-minute format like what we just watched with Sarek, I think that you'd get a deliverable episode of Star Trek. It might might seem like it's kind of more paced in alignment with the rest of the Star Trek universe. I don't think it would be great Star Trek though. So, Otto, what are your thoughts on that? So,
yeah, man, I struggle with Lower Decks, and it's not for lack of trying. It's like eating a meal without chewing. If you just swallow it, like technically you've ingested it, but you haven't digested it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, those old scientists from Stranger Worlds did a ton for me for these characters, because I was able to almost interact with them in a way. Obviously, it makes it more real to have the physical live action stuff, but yeah, this is... I'll get to it later. I wanted to ask something, take your guys' temperature on something, and since Dan picked this one, I'm going to bring up something that he said in our Strange New Worlds review, where he thinks in season 3 they put in certain moments just to be outrageous, just to farm reaction from people. And I feel like, to your point, maybe you'll agree with me, Peanut Hamper and Badgie, I feel like are 2 characters who exist to be outrageous, maybe to farm reaction. Am I crazy?
I feel like Peanut Hamper was more like a kind of like, here's the extra comps, but what if them was was just a bratty girl who just got into Starfleet. That's how it started, like, and just sort of like, coasted on, rejecting her father's like kind of thing. That's like a classic trope somewhere else. So I kind of feel like that wasn't more a reaction. Badgie, maybe. Badgie was definitely a little bit more upfront, especially with the episode, which I forget the episode name, but the one where he, features him for the first time. Badgie definitely feels more like a kind of reactionary character to a point of just like, again, it was like a holodeck malfunction, but what if it was personal? But I don't know. I feel like a lot of humor in Lower Decks is that reactionary humor. It's a lot of, and the style of formatting of a show as well. Like we keep mentioning, like Family Guy, The Simpsons, South Park. Anything is like you point and you laugh, and you kind of have a good time with those flash moments before something else happens, and it is quick and reactionary, and I think the context of it being set against Star Trek means they can kind of get away with a lot more of those quick fire moments as opposed to maybe sort of like longer, sort of like more paused humor that you might find in, I don't know, something like Strange New Worlds, when you have the 4 Vulcans, when they spend a great deal more time, sort of like 4.5 Vulcans, when they spend a bit more time on the humor. I'm rambling now. I'd like someone else to talk because I've forgotten my original point, but go on.
So I have a bit of experience with this in the comic book world, because in the comic book world, what you'll often have is there will be obvious instances of the writer putting in a panel or a line of dialogue or a joke or something that is plainly, obviously meant to be cut out and then posted on Reddit or Twitter or wherever, or Instagram or Twitter, TikTok or whatever. And it is so obviously a plea for attention. It is obviously a case of like, signal boost this, and like, here's your thing for the day. It's part of your content feed. And a lot of the time, those moments feel very artificial, or they're out of character, or they just make you kind of you look at it and go, that's really, really craven. And I always look at it and I go, I think that Badgie and Peanut Hamper come from a much more organic place than that. Like Peanut Hamper is a spin on the classic Trek trope of, we have this noble mechanical race that is fighting for its right to existence and sapience. Its data struggle, put into a different, less humanoid format, anthropomorphizes this, makes it anthrocentric. And then they take the common humor thing of, okay, but what if they weren't a noble individual who was suffering, and like, what if they were just an asshole?
That's the secret fourth Avatar film from James Cameron. Is like, what if the Na'vi were just assholes?
Well, I think that might be the new one. But it's just like, that's a very obvious, like, what if this noble, wonderful, incredible was just an asshole? And in its own way, it kind of adds to the point about exocomps in them being people. Guess what? Sometimes people are assholes. You don't get to... Yeah, the entire point of the exocomps proving that they are people and that they have their own right to sapience and sentience is acknowledging that they're going to develop sets of personalities of their own, and there's going to be bad ones. Like, you can't... There's no such thing as a race of entirely good people. It doesn't happen.
Unless it's the Justice
And Badgie... Well, yes.
Nothing wrong with them.
Not a thing. And Badgie, meanwhile, is just like a take on the Clippy humor. It's, you look like you're trying to do something. Can I help? And I think that is maybe more in the realm of like dated internet humor. Like, I feel like Clippy is one of those things that even now you talk about, and most people of a younger generation will go, "What the fuck is Clippy?"
Oh, that's the thing from the memes. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But I feel like because of like the age group that Mike Mahan is, that it's probably an actual genuine place of, I fucking hate Clippy, that little fuck. What if he was blown out into a holodeck program and he could try and kill me because of all the times I've told him to fuck off? And I feel like that's a lot more naturalistic of a place coming at it as a Star Trek fan with an idea for a joke than I want this character to become a meme.
So in answer to your question,
I feel like
Auto...
they're a bit more honest and sincere.
In answer to your question, Auto, no.
That's my personal feeling. It. I can totally see how there is obviously so much attention and time belabored on it, and there are so many jokes that involve them, and they keep on coming back. I can absolutely see why you would go, yeah, you're overplaying this, you want this to farm attention. I can absolutely see that perspective on it.
Well, just the name Peanut Hamper is like very millennial humor, like LEL, look how random I am. And I'm like, Because all those instances you mentioned about the journey towards sentience, that happens in TNG. It doesn't happen in this episode. In this one, it's like so.
Yeah, it's part of the reference humor. That's like it's a legacy.
But Dan, since you put the idea in my head initially, I want to hear your thoughts on those two characters.
So Peanut Hamper. Well, I do agree to a certain extent that I think they're chasing the dragon of I Demand Honor. That the GIF that was inaugural to the series and still shows up and is referenced daily by Trek culture. And so they're constantly looking for that next GIF that they can make, or GIF if you pronounce it that way, where it'll just kind of take over and keep the mimetic nature of the episode going. But the problem is there's just so much, and what are you going to pull from? Like which moment are you going to pull? And I don't think this episode has one of those solidly, but it certainly tries with, spilling all the contraband out and having all the referential stuff in there. The Vulcan sword spills out in the EP, and the what else? I think Spock's space helmet is
yes,
part of the trash in there.
Remco 1976 Star Trek Space Fun helmet.
So yeah, I mean they're trying, but it's tough, especially in an episode that's trying to tie up some plot lines and actually deliver itself and stand a little bit differently, for it to really come across something like that that's just organically funny and interesting. I don't know. I haven't gotten too deep into the series either. I'm familiar with the first season. That's about it. So hopefully later on things become a little bit different and less just that's one of the things that really kind of turns me off on rewatch. Like we used to enjoy Family Guy when it was on TV, my wife and I, and it's hard to rewatch anymore because it's just so random. Like Otto, like you said, just just like, oh, look at this, we can cut right to the Autobots and the Decepticons fighting like the honeymooners, and it's just hilarious. Like how hilarious this is.
Bam, zooms straight to the Eternal Cube.
So I do think that's what's really kind of driving the profit motive here, and there's a lot of enduring value in taking something and having it become viral and mimetic. It's free advertising, and let the internet run away with it, whatever. And certainly that's part of the budgetary decision of even putting a show like this on the air, right? I mean, how can you greenlight a cartoon about Star Trek? Look, what the animated series is not exactly venerated. How are you going to do it right? Well, because it'll drive revenue and get people to subscribe, right? So you got to do that somehow, and it's got to be, especially for something that is paywalled. Like we talked about this being a CBS All Access show, something that people cannot watch unless they've already put the money down. You need to have something that reaches out and pulls people in from outside. So I think that's entirely the motivation behind the spectacle of Lower Decks. They just failed to find that one moment in this episode.
Listen, more people need to see the magics of Megas 2, and then they'll be completely converted on to TAS. Sorry, go on, Otto.
Since you mentioned TAS, very clever, fun moment where they reference Kirk and Spock and they show them from the animated series format. That was really good.
That's good.
Because they could show them live action and get away with it, but they chose to go TAS.
Yeah, of course they go TAS. Good
so
segue.
At risk of the review being longer than the watch along, maybe we should.
That's very true. So let's do some. Bread. Gentlemen, what was your bread of the episode? I'm gonna elongate that bread even more as we go on. Stars, what was your bread? Single most moment in the episode that stood out to you, like Sisko rambling bread at us was in that episode of Babel.
Gentlemen, Wolf 359 was an inside job.
It was! Wolf 359 was a job.
I'm sorry, that's the gag of the episode.
It's the melting temperature of tritanium.
Yeah.
Phasers can't melt tritanium beams.
Warp cores can't melt Borg steel. But then he follows up and goes like, the Dominion aren't real. The Founders aren't real. The Dominion War didn't happen. It's like, okay, now you're wrong there.
like, guess what? That's the referential humor. But if you're in exactly the right spot, that hits you like a fucking freight train.
That's quite funny.
That's perfect.
That's a good one. Dan?
What about you, Idol? What's your...
we're going to me. Okay, wow. My episode. I'm going to go for just the Titan appearing. And that was like, I remember watching it the first time and I was thinking, they mentioned the Titan at the start and I thought, is that a reference or are they actually going to do it? And then they did. And not just that, but they used Sean Tarongo's USS Titan Lunar class design, which for those that don't know, this is actually quite an old design. So back when Pocket Books decided to do a USS Titan book series, back when the relaunch series, when Star Trek was like dead on the air, we didn't know when it was going to happen. They said, all right, let's do a series of books about Captain Riker and the USS Titan, and this was like back in 2008 or something like that.
It
like,
was post Nemesis.
Post Nemesis,
right.
and they had a competition, and they said whoever can, design us a ship, and we'll make it official. So Sean Tarongo, and we have interviewed him for our charity stream. You can find it on the channel somewhere. Him and Bill Krause and oh shit, who else do we interview? Fuck, that's going to be really embarrassing. The other one. Yeah, that's not. That's terrible.
Oh, you're a monster.
shit.
You're a monster.
Thomas Marone from Star Trek Online. There we go. Thank you.
Just watch
sorry.
you twist on the wind.
Sorry, Tom.
They're watching right now.
Yeah, I know. Shit. Anyway, but yes, Sean won the competition, designed the Lunar class USS Titan, and yeah, after all this time, they actually brought it in for canon, brought it in as an actual design, and it was on Star Trek Picard as well. So, that was a great moment. Not just seeing the Titan, not just seeing Riker, but seeing this fan design actually come in and swoop in and save the day. And I was just like, yes, because they could have gone and just made any design. It could have been an ambassador class just for reuse assets, but no, they actually went in, modelled the Lunar class Titan, consulted with Sean Tarongo, and just went through. And so that was my bread of the episode. How about you, Dan?
There's a couple of moments that stuck out to me, but I guess one of the things, just from having experienced the whole first season in relatively short time, you can binge watch this pretty easily. It's how when Freeman is knocked down by the Pakled in the corridor during the fight scene, and she's just collapsed on the floor in a bloody heap, and so Mariner just says mom and runs over to her, gets blood on her hands, and that's the one moment in the entire episode where she's not babbling. She's just at a loss for words, and it's very brief. Like Otto said, you just don't have the time to chew and digest and really reflect on much that happens. But they took a specific moment there to just show that, for all her bluster and her kind of over the top nature, that there's a moment of introspection that she had there. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
Auto, butter my bread.
It's the pacing. I forgot how crazy the pacing is in Lower Decks. I haven't seen it in a while. It's the reason I haven't finished the series. But to be positive, I will say it enhances some of the humor. When they're going, something catches you out of left field, I'm like dying laughing. I'm like, okay, that was good. And the fact that, they don't linger on it. They're on to like 3 sentences later by the time you're done laughing. Yeah. That really works in their favor sometimes.
I will say this, this is a hectic episode. Season 4 and 5 of Lower Decks are not this frenetic. I think the first season is definitely the worst for sort of like this kind of energy, and especially this episode, they did pack a lot into the season finale. Like I say, the word count was kind of outrageous for 24 minutes, actually outpaced quite a lot of TNG episodes. On that note... okay, now let's do it.
The best advice I can give you is to just be yourself.
You're the worst thing that ever happened to Zek. You're the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Actually, that's the second best piece of advice.
In fact, you're the worst thing that ever happened to the entire Ferengi Alliance. No. Just stop saying that.
Da-da! Dun, 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 dun. Okay, best of... I nearly considered doing 5 minutes for this, but thought, the only answer everyone would have given was add another 20 minutes to slow it down. So, Auto, please give me your best and worst moments from the episode.
All right, my worst is going to be Peanut Hamper. For some of the reasons I listed, but also, it starts what you were saying about the Data-esque parallel. That's the best part of TNG's quality of life, and they don't even brush against it. She shows up, pieces out just like that, and I'm like, oh, that was kind of a waste of a pretty cool cameo. So I know Peanut Hamper comes back and whatnot, but for this specific episode, it was kind of a waste. Best moment, Jonathan Frakes. Not that he showed up, it's that he matches the energy of this series.
It is a different
Riker. Go back, watch the animated series. Shatner is sleepy in half of those. He's there to collect a paycheck. You can just tell.
Sabotage.
But you will never hear this voice of Frakes in TNG. Maybe a fleeting sentence or two, but he kicks it up a notch, and he matches everyone else's energy. And I really appreciate that he doesn't just half-ass it.
You can hear the
Even
smile on his
like,
face.
goofiest, yeah,
and all
he's
his
never quite
delivery.
like this. Yeah.
You're right, like the cadence of which he speaks, like, because if you didn't know that was Jonathan Frakes, just from the titles, you go like, oh, maybe they got some good impersonator in, and he's slightly different cadence. He comes in it with a different energy, and he's much more enthusiastic, and he's not kind of, he like you could say, oh, maybe it's age, but he's not even that kind of Riker in Picard either. In Picard, he's
Right.
much more TNG Riker. In Lower Decks, he's the Lower Decks Riker. But like you say, yeah, it's great. Stars, best worst.
Oh, I think my best moment would probably be. That's tricky. I'm gonna have to go with. Fuck, there's a lot to choose from actually. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna go with the theme of Star Trek, of Starfleet rather, failing to maintain cultures that they have like obviously fucked with, because that is something that crops up again and again and again and again, and it's so prevalent in TOS. It is so like Wrath of Khan happens because they don't bother to go and check on what Khan was doing, even though they said they would, and because they don't check their fucking star charts. And a reflection on the fact of how that looks from a second contact ship and the problems that that results in is really, really nice. And that's arguably like the driving point of like the entirety of Lower Decks is like we are constantly brushing up against the mistakes made by previous characters or the logical consequences of what happens when you go in and irreparably fuck with someone's culture in a very dramatic way that suits your morality play. But like, can you even imagine what the Onarans and the Breckians looked like 5 minutes after that episode ended? Can you even imagine? It would look great for your 80s drug like lesson, but good God, that was horrific. And I appreciate if we're talking about like Lower Decks examining the sci-fi conceit of Starfleet, that's a really important thing to touch on, and it's interwoven into every other part of it. It's how it makes the referential humor work for me, and I feel like this especially comes back in so many ways because it's a season finale. It tugs on all those threads. Least favorite part, I think we could have stood to have another 5 minutes, maybe with a bit more foreshadowing of like peanut hampers, inherent like sociopathic tendencies, maybe a little bit more of a reason for the gag with Rutherford's like mode switching, like that's the most Family Guy of the humor, and it doesn't really apart from reminding you, by the way, I'm a cyborg, it doesn't really add anything to the episode other than to make some exposition a bit more funny. So I feel like they could have maybe done something with that, but it's mostly just a case of like, yeah, lost opportunities. I feel like overall this leaves me wanting more, but not in a case of I felt unfulfilled, just I really liked what I got and I would want more of it. So it's kind of, yeah, that's my best and my worst.
Dan.
Okay. Best moment. I like the little character moment where Mariner transforms herself into the model Starfleet officer, and it's the same persona, the same face, but they just do her hair slightly differently, and it's the small tweak that they do, and they do it so often in Trek where just to keep it fresh, right? They'll take Data and give him an episode as Laurel. They'll take Crusher and turn her into Pulaski for a full season, right? Those little tweaks that they make.
Small modification.
right. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and just how they managed to make that jump off the screen, and it really translated well. It came across, and she spent, I think, a full commercial break as that persona, and it was interesting. Worst moment. One of the things that I think was done to become mimetic and was just gross and crude was when Tiana is talking to Shex in the hallway and talks about I think I wrote down Bajoran beef stick and her coital hooks. And it's just, It's just
I want to say that's like the
Gross.
worst thing that her and Shax's
Not a-
relationship
not a-
comes up with, but I'm pretty sure there's worse than that.
not a Starfleet
That holodeck
hallway
was never the
conversation.
same.
Yeah. So,
boy.
anyways, clearly in shock humor, and I just don't like that in my Star Trek. So,
Yeah, no, they should go for much more like solid humor. Like, so I was reading a particularly erotic passage from my grandmother's journal.
right. Including one of the classiest episodes that we should all aspire
To be fair, universally panned.
And yet we reference it every day.
Every time. Yep.
Oh, never a day before I find. Anyway,
Cultural footprint of Sub Rosa cannot be measured.
over time says how many Bajoran beef sticks out of 10. I'm gonna echo Auto because I can't think worse. I don't like peanut hamper, but only because I know of what comes. But also, like, I feel like if you're gonna make a bratty Starfleet kind of person, don't make her useful. Like, because the exocoms are
All
immediately.
Starfleet officers should be useful.
They should be, but here we are. No, okay. I was going to say, but here's Worf anyway.
Literally one of the worst examples you could go for. but
Exactly.
okay.
That's why I didn't say it. That's officially on record that I didn't say that. Best moment is just the little offhand airplane-esque Zucker joke of Rutherford tapping his head and going, optimistic mode, this is gonna be great. And I just like the 1-2 pan of like pressing the button, optimistic mode, this is gonna be great. That got me. That was just like sensible chuckles all round. That's just like such a great 1-2 line of, and you could just completely like miss it. You could go be like, oh good, like he's happy with what's going on, but no, that's just perfect humor.
So what was your worst
would
moment?
do that
Yeah.
gag with the airport like announcers
Peanut
like
hamper.
having a bitchy fight. Yeah.
Yeah, my worst moment was just peanut hamper in general. I
Yeah. I'm going to change your mind about Peanut Hamper, all of you. So, all right. So everybody is down on Peanut Hamper, but I want to point out a few things. In the quality of life, Peanut Hamper nopes out when asked to self-immolate. Sending it into a dangerous situation, it refuses. It won't cooperate. Not unlike what Peanut Hamper does when asked to download a virus and infect, a la Iborg, in an entire race potentially. If they're networked together, and cause their demise. Does that make? I think Peanut Hamper actually had a hit of morality, and the entire rest of the crew was just acting like funny guy, Family Guy crew. And I think Peanut Hamper had the moral high ground in this episode of just saying, no, I'm not going to do that. We've already been through this before. This is silly.
Have you seen the episode though where she makes out with a Birdman?
Well, I guess we have another top 10 all timer coming up that we have to review here. So
That's a great episode.
It's not.
It is.
But also earlier in the season, so Rutherford goes through a subplot, a B plot, very similar to what Peanut Hamper does, where he is trying to find his. I think it's maybe even the first episode. He's trying to find his role on the Cerritos, and he goes through engineering at first, and then he goes to security, and he goes, and so it's not unlike what Peanut Hamper does. And Peanut Hamper has found that her technique in the medical ward is great. This is what she's cut out to do. And when being asked to move on to something else that's not what she wants to do, she rightfully, has reservations about that. So I think that there's a little bit more depth. It's not overtly called out, and again, it's just played for laughs. But I think there's a little bit more here than everybody's giving it credit for.
I also think it's a case of like there is a subtle speciesism going on there, because let me be real with you. If you walked up to a human crewmate and said, hey, here's a bomb, strap it to your chest, go over to that ship and blow yourself up for the benefit of everyone else, you hero, what would you say to them?
We are Starfleet. That's what Starfleet.
Like, fuck you would. Like, it's the whole thing of, guess what? Like, you are explicitly placing less value on Peanut Hamper's life because she's a robot.
Right.
You
Exactly
would not ask that of any like human or alien crewmate. You are explicitly devaluing her because she's a robot and assuming she'll do it.
Is there no hang on, because wasn't Troy one of the focus of one of Troy's episodes where she's going for the commander training was sending people to their deaths and having to issue that order?
Except for the fact that no one gave her an order, they were just assuming she'd do it.
No, but there is a situation as a Starfleet officer where you would have to send yourself into a dangerous situation for the benefit of your crew.
Yeah, she had
Oh,
to
yeah,
order Jordy
absolutely.
to go fix something, even knowing he would die.
Exactly.
I mean,
but
those are
not
good
just
points,
on the
but
command.
I wish they would actually mention any of them in the episode instead of letting us fill in the gaps. I mean, that is part of the fun of us sitting and discussing it and having little aha revelations. But still, I mean, if you have 5,000 words in the episode, could you dedicate a few of them?
Take the time for
to the
something
ethical
interesting,
conundrum?
right? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, that's 4,190 episodes. Anyway, words. Sorry, in this episode. Sorry, I had to fill the cover. How about? Oh, wait a minute. I'm just receiving a call from Aladar Jarok.
I can show you my rating
there we go.
code.
Schiller rating 3.5. Associational rating norm -3. That's much too low a rating.
I'm just not accustomed to seeing an unsatisfactory rating on a member of my crew.
Dan, Schiller rating, go.
Yeah, I'm down to 5. This is, I guess I had a great time watching it the first time through, but this just really isn't Star Trek. There's so much.
No, we need a code.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I gotta give you. So this is gonna be sweet little Captain kisses. How many sweet little Captain kisses out of 10? Right. I already had that one played. But unfortunately, only 5 kisses from me. The point that Otto made, that so much is left off the paper that really just deserves to be there. It's just kind of unforgivable and really makes it not so much Star Trek and more just a sitcom. And that's what it's designed to be. Call a spade, but it's just not my brand.
Space Spade. Go Auto.
I'll give this 4 sweet little Captain kisses. There are certain Star Treks, I'm looking at you, Scouts, which I wish did not exist. I think they water down the value. I think they water down the value of Star Trek.
Rubber ducky.
Why do I bother talking on these reviews? I'm just engagement farming. I know I'll say things that you'll have to react.
You're the peanut hamper of
We
the
got our
episode.
meme. Thanks, guys. All right, that's it. Let's wrap it up. You set Otto off.
Sorry, my hands are
being
here. I
said-
will not interrupt you anymore.
That being said, Lower Decks solidly exists on the side of I'm glad this exists and targets who it does, and it adds to the value. All right, so that's my preface. I'm not down on Lower Decks. It just doesn't appeal to me. The pacing just I can't digest anything with this pacing. And it works for some of the humor. I'll sit there and laugh. But I had completely forgotten that Shax died. Even though I've watched this and season 2 and season 3, I thought he was still alive. In my head, I forgot he died. I would never forget that Tasha died or that Jadzia died. Those are like big monumental things, and they just blow by it. They do a little scene at the end, torpedo fire him off or whatever. And I'm sure they reference him again, but it's just the pacing makes it so difficult to sit and chew on things the way I like to do with my sci-fi. So, if you want humor and you're a Star Trek fan who loves a good laugh, I highly recommend Lower Decks. For me, 4 sweet little Captain kisses out of 10.
I'm going to be a bit more positive. I enjoyed this. I wish it had longer. It had feature film quality to it. It did a lot of...
Something wrong with your nose there, Dan?
Stinker. It was a stinker.
No, I enjoyed this. I feel like everyone's right. Like, this was, for a Lower Decks episode, this was incredibly frenetic. I think this one and the first episode are definitely like episodes like, shit's happening all over the place. Don't stop. And I feel like for people wanting to rewatch it, this is not a good place to start. Maybe go and have a look at some of the random isolated, like season 3, 4, or 5 episodes to have a somewhat better pacing for Lower Decks episodes that are a bit more enjoyable. But for a kind of like a season finale, for sort of the feature film of the first series, like, I enjoyed this quite a bit. I'm going to give it the ever cromulent 7 sweet little Captain kisses out of 10. It was good. It wasn't perfect. It, like I say, it needed another 15 minutes or so. Expand out some of these points. Let's not rush a bit more. But, they had a lot to go through. Plus, at least 4 of those points are, the Titan and Riker coming in at the end of the day to the motion picture. Da, 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 chills up the spine. Like, yeah, oh, my member berries. Oh, he's got them right by them. He's dragging me out to the Packlands with them. And there's a mental image you'll never forget. Stars.
What was my pre-rating? I forget.
I've forgotten. I can't remember. I didn't write those down.
I think you went pretty strong.
Yeah, you were high on this one, like 8-ish.
Yeah, I think an 8 is about right. I would give this 8 sweet little Captain kisses out of 10. I think this is a really important episode looking back, actually. Given where a lot of season 2 and season 3 goes, this has ripple effects for seasons to come. I laughed at a lot of the jokes. I think that maybe one of the actual weaker parts was actually the nostalgia baiting and the remember berries of the Titan sequence. As much as it's great to see that, and the jokes on board the Titan are hilarious. I especially love the Enterprise finale episode. That's incredible.
That was good.
I think it's just a really, really solid episode of Lower Decks. I understand that it's not to everyone's taste. I'm not going to jump down anyone's throat for not liking it. It's a very different format. It's a very different kind of Star Trek. I'm not. Yeah, I think it's just a case of like, especially if it's the case of, it's just like and it's also a generational gap, I think, as well. It's just a case of like, not a case of like, oh, you have to be young to understand it. It's more just a case of like, I grew up on a very different kind of media. That means that I'm more modulated to this kind of entertainment. So this maybe I'm the actual target audience. Even though it's written by like a TNG guy who loves throwing TNG references like left, right, and center. But yeah, no, it just hits right for me. I don't think it's the strongest Lower Decks episode by a country mile. There were at least 4 or 5 I would have picked ahead of this, including one I was really annoyed I didn't get to do in the draft, but that's fine. We move. Which I'm really looking forward to reviewing. But yeah, no, it's a really good, strong episode, strong finale, and I look forward to reviewing more Lower Decks in the future.
Fantastic. Well, this episode gets 6 sweet little Captain Kisses out of 10. It's, a perfectly cromulent episode. We actually rate it the same as Through the Lens of Time, the Strange New Worlds Season 3 episode. It's not as good as the Lorelei signal from Taz. I'm so sorry. This is science. We can't have that. It's also not as good as Star Trek The Motion Picture. That was a 6.7. So, But it is at least better than The Naked Now and Culus and Strange New World, the episode. It's better than Terra Nova, and that was just pure shale.
God.
I will never not put a shale reference in whenever I can. Why have I not got that as a trigger either? Okay, everyone, we'll be back soon with some more episode reviews and some other things as well. Keep an eye on our Discord. Go and join that. Absolutely fantastic. And also notify yourself of all future live and exclusive things on our YouTube channel by hitting the big subscribe button. It's great. So we'll be back soon. We'll have all
comment, subscribe.
Yeah. It made out with a better score than the Section 1 movie. Yeah, the Section 1 movie, which is actually the worst rated thing we have on here, with a minus 47.2.
What was the 0.2 for?
I don't know who put that. Someone put a decimal in there, probably Auto.
Pretty sure I give it a flat 0. By the way, speaking of scores, I appreciated that when the Titan hit, they played the entire theme and they didn't fade out. They're like, no, we're going the whole gamut with this, baby.
That's great.
The band's here. The band's here. For everyone watching, we'll see you later and see you soon. Live long, prosper. Ta-ra.
Peace and long life.
Peace and long life. And all of
and
that.
To use twos.
Laters.